Well, let's turn our attention to other stories now. Nigeria's inflation accelerated to the highest rate in almost 11 years in June, complicating the task of the central bank in an economy which is already at risk of contracting.
Simply put, Nigeria's inflation has hit a record high. Now let's break it down. Inflation is a continuous rise in the prices of goods and services as measured in Nigeria by the CPI, also known as the Consumer Price Index. It is often described as a situation where too much money is chasing too few goods.
Now, in inflation, the currency loses purchasing power, and the purchasing power of a given amount of naira will reduce during inflation. For example, assuming the cost of buying 4 tubers of yam is 2,000 naira, that price will be double in an economy hugely affected by inflation, and that means that the 2,000 naira will only buy about 3 tubers of yam, or even less, as against about buying 4.
There are basically two causes of inflation. First is a surge in demand for goods known as demand pull inflation. And then the second is a rise in cost of goods due to decrease in supply. Now that's usually caused by a rise in the cost of production and perhaps increase in taxation. That's called cost push inflation.
Now, consumer prices in Nigeria surged by 16.5% year on year in June of 2016, following a 15.6% jump in May and a 13.7% jump in April. Now, the headline index recorded a 1.9% increase from April to May and 0.9% increase from May to June. We're talking about the differential between the months of April to May and May to June.
Okay, the National Bureau of Statistics says the figure is far above the market expectations of 16.3% due to the sharp rise in the cost of food, housing and utilities. Well, this is why we should bring in our guest in the studio. He's the economist, he's the expert. He will, of course, give us clarity as far as this is concerned. Segun Omishaki, good morning and thanks for coming back on the show.
Good morning, thanks for
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
16.5% inflation rate.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's going to get worse,
Yes.
according to experts
Yes.
like yourself. Why are we in this pass? The IMF has already downgraded its projections for
Good
2016,
for us. Yeah.
for Nigeria.
Yeah, just like you have just said now, you have given a very good statistics about what is happening in Nigeria with respect to inflation. And let me just say this, that it's not the actual level, as it were, or rate of inflation that is problematic. It is the rate at which the level, the rate moves from one rate to the other.
That's the fluctuation.
That is the fluctuation. Because if you are, just like you have said now, if you are an investor, you want to come in, you are not really interested in what is the actual rate now. You are much more interested in the business confidence. You are interested in making sure that when you bring your money or your capital in, you know that in the next 10 years, the fluctuation in the economy that will be reflected on the inflation rate will be such that it will not decrease the value of your money. So that is very important. And you will also see that inflation, why it's so important in any economy, is because it reflects the general health of the economy. And it's not just one of those rates. It's a rate that says whether you are doing good as an economy or not. So if an investor is coming in, the first signal they will look at is how you are doing, how you have been able to manage your inflation rate from whether they are looking at month to month or year in. And again, if you look at the situation of Nigeria, this is very, very serious. You have told us about different causes. You have just said it of inflation. This is the exact time we are having inflation rate. It is the same time we are having serious issue with unemployment. The same time we are having serious issue with productive capacity. The same time we are having serious issue with our interest rate. So you have, as at now, the interest rate MPR that comes to around 14%, and then you have the inflation rate at 16.5. You're already having a negative real interest rate, and that talks a lot about how you are going to invest or how you manage the domestic economy. That is the situation we are now.
All right. Now, you talked about inflation, the fluctuations earlier on. Yeah. Now, if an investor is going to take a look at some of these constant fluctuations generally, what are the reasons or what are the factors responsible for that constant fluctuations that is making the whole thing go like that?
Okay, so let's start with this. You are the investor. You want to ask yourself, what are the determinants, what are the factors you're going to look at before you invest? One of them, you want to look at the growth rate. Let's start from the expected returns on your investment. At least you must have some information that says when you invest this, you're going to get this. That is one. Again, you want to look at the interest rate. You want to look at the business confidence. You want to look at so many non-economic factors, political factors. Is there any war and the rest? Now, if you look at the situation of Nigeria, you have a situation where your inflation could be primarily be determined by the fact that there is population boom, or people are getting more money, so the purchasing power is increasing. They want, everybody is consuming, and in such a situation, if it's not matched with the same level of production, you have a situation where the inflation rate increases. But in this case, what we have is we are already even experiencing recession. In other words, aggregate demand is falling. So if aggregate demand is falling, you are expecting to see a fall in the level of general activities. But this is not the case because the cost of production is high. The cost of is not the actual production. The productive capacity of the manufacturing sector is so weak that you can't produce anything, but whatever little thing you are producing is still costly.
It takes a lot.
Yeah, now as I'm talking to you, we people buy 1 liter of diesel costs about 200. And you know, we just increased the PMS by 40%, and the shock from the exchange rate is there. So you have some serious structural issues. So this inflation is caused by the structural misalignment that we are experiencing now. That is why people are believing that the step or the decision of the CBN to increase the MPR, it is not really appropriate as now. That what the government should be doing, and the federal government also, is to come in with the fiscal side to revamp the economy, to give confidence to both the domestic and the external investor. So that is what the situation.
Okay, it's good you talk about the CBN. At this point, let's bring in the governor of Central Bank, Godwin Emefiele himself, and let's find out what he had to say about this.
Oil exporting countries or countries affected by the drop in commodity prices, practically all are facing the challenge, and everybody is looking at the possibility of diversifying their economy from being over-reliant on oil. And so obviously we are on the right course. The challenges are still there, not just for Nigeria, but for different countries in the world. But what is important is that I re-emphasize that we're on the right course by saying that we need to continue to diversify our economy. And I think for Nigeria, I see light at the end of the tunnel because we have a couple of Nigerian investors that have really embraced the diversification of the Nigerian economy.
All right, we just had the central bank governor there. He was talking about dropping commodity pricing, and I'd like you to educate us on that issue of drop in commodity pricing, what the implications of that is on the economy.
Okay, since about...
I assume he's talking about the global drop in commodity pricing, of course.
Since 2014, the global economy has been faced with serious global shock due to the importance of crude oil. And then the price has been falling. And unfortunately, of course, we've been talking about this diversification for years. Some people even said before we were born, Nigeria has been talking about diversification. So everything the Nigerian economy is standing on, is sitting on, is this crude oil. The federal government earned huge money. The state governments are waiting for the sharing, and there is nothing that is happening domestically. Our export strength is weakening. And so when the price of oil fell drastically, it comes through, first of all, the government's revenue. The revenue falls, and then when the revenue falls, it affects the state economy. It affects everybody. It affects spending, and that's why the government is saying we are going to be borrowing money. We're going to make sure that we block some leakages, and so that is the fundamental problem. And it is the problem because it is structural. We don't produce or export anything relatively. The only thing we export is the crude oil, and we don't produce it. I keep telling people, we extract it. When you want to produce, basic economy says you had a value addition in production. I cannot take this from you and give to another person and say this is what I'm producing.
Okay, Segun Misha can just hold on as we shed some more light on this. For our viewers, on a monthly basis, consumer prices went up 1.7% compared to a 2.75% rise in the preceding month. The price of food dropped to 1.44% in June from 2.56% in May. Housing, water, electricity and gas 1.3% from 3.7% in May.
What that simply means is that the cost of food items, water, gas and the rest are a bit cheaper now than they were last month. And that's according to the Bureau of Statistics. But from our findings, a bag of rice is still sold for 18,000 naira. Now, a tin of garri, which was sold for 600 naira last month, is still sold for the same price. Now, inflation rate in Nigeria averaged 12.15% from 1996 until 2016, reaching an all-time high of 47.56% in 1996 at a record low of minus 2.49% in 2000.
We've had, financial experts like yourself talk about the alarming, interest rate and all of that. And on the other hand, you have some experts saying, look, there should be a rise, in interest rates to stabilize inflation. So I'm just wondering, how will that affect the economy, number one, and will that necessarily attract, investors, especially foreign investors?
Okay, now let's start with this. The CBN has the authority to manipulate, in quotes, to control the volume of credit in circulation, given whatever aim they want. If the CBN is after trying to make sure that they stabilize inflation rate, inflation rate, yes, or they are targeting inflation rate, they will, tamper with interest rates. So in this case, the authority in charge feels that his responsibility as at now is to monitor inflation rate. And there is no choice in economies that you make. This is like a laboratory. There is no choice you make that you're going to come out and say, oh, you are just smiling. There will be costs. There will be implications. So the question is, how do we weigh the implications? You achieve some measure of achievement, but how do we weigh the indirect impacts that will have on the investment, on business environment? And which one is more important given the situation? For instance, if somebody is sick and at the same time is having some, maybe the hand is broken and is having some life-threatening situation that has to do with the heart, I think the doctor will not say, let's leave this heart alone and let's be attending to the broken bone. They will face the most important. So we think the most important thing now is to return confidence into this economy. See, if you are trying to make sure that
So how do you return confidence?
Yeah, if the CBN is saying, okay, I'm going to increase the interest rate so that the investors will come, portfolio investments, short-term investments, they will come, yes, and then they will go. But for capital investment, strong investment, it has to be the health of the economy. And this is very simple. Retain these interest rates at the level. Let the federal government also complement your effort by, the federal government has been, I want to see also the sincerity in the CBN's policy. They've been under a lot of pressure. The federal government has been, weighing behind this issue. They should have come out. There should have been a strong spending, fiscal spending for now that will revamp the whole economy. The people don't have the money to buy anything. The salaries are not being paid. The producers cannot get access to forex, even though we have, regulated. The power sector is down. People don't have, everything is tight. So if you increase that at the same time, and when people don't even have the capacity to buy anything, the economy will keep going down. You might achieve your aim, but the economy will keep going down.
All right, there's a lot of borrowing going on here and there but the government have been talking about borrowing generally. When it comes to the issue of borrowing at a time like this, how does it compound or help the situation?
Yeah, it compounds the situation. Okay. Do you know government itself is a borrower? Yes, that's what I've said. Government borrows from you, then borrows from people from outside. And so when you increase the interest rate, from 12 to 14%. That's the benchmark. Don't forget, we are not talking about the actual rate by commercial bank, because it's going to be from around 25 to 27%. I was even reading that people that borrowed money from bank earlier, before the pronouncement of this policy, were backdating. The commercial banks were backdating that policy in such a way that your interest rate now will be on the new rate and not on the bargain rate, to see how this could be very serious. So it will affect costs of borrowing. Government is a borrower, so government capacity to service the debt is already huge now. Now government is going to be exposed to a very serious issue in servicing the debt. That is point one. The banking sector also will be under serious stress, because the rate of non-performing loan will be increased. And that's one of the issues. Yeah, and you know, we almost had a serious situation in the banking sector. The government just, CBN just came in and trying to say, okay, they are good, they are strong. So we see that this situation will further put stress on them, pressure. That is point two. Even the producers, the SMEs, that has been the core of the present regime's preaching, that we're going to give them money, we're going to make sure they cannot do that. Somebody who's selling shoes cannot just go to bank and be paying about 25 or 27%. That is not just possible. So that is the implication.
All right, let's listen to the Finance Minister, Kemi Adeosun, talk about the issue of borrowing here. I'd like my producers to play that for us to watch and hear.
Expect to borrow about 1.8 trillion, which will be split between domestic and international. And the budget support that we're talking about to the World Bank is a request for a total of $2.5 billion in budget support, and also the ADB. So that's part of our budget financing. And why are we speaking to the World Bank and the ADB? They offer concessional financing at very low rates of interest, as low as 2%. With about 20 years to pay and a long moratorium. That's very important, because the projects that we intend to fund with this borrowed money are capital projects, like our rail projects, our road projects, which need long-term money, long-term concessional money. And so it makes sense for us. We don't currently owe those multilateral agencies. Every member has the right to apply. And so we've decided to go and try and get the lowest cost financing, because we recognize that those are the things that we need to invest in to get the Nigerian economy moving.
Okay, you heard it there from the Finance Minister. I mean, 1.8 trillion to be borrowed both within and, of course, externally. And she's saying this is part of our budget financing.
Yeah.
Can we really achieve this? Because some are already saying that this budget is dead on arrival. Of course, it's interesting, 2% interest rate and all of that. It looks really, really attractive. But in the long term, is that going to serve us well?
And unfortunately, we don't have any option. That is just a fact. The government...
Doesn't that make it even more precarious, where we don't have an option? And so the other person who is actually borrowing or giving us this money might be at an advantage rather than Nigeria's interest here.
Yeah, it's a simple market. If I'm selling some goods and you are coming to me, I'm already in charge. If you don't need it, you won't come. Or you just come and say, okay, I'm not interested. Or I come to you, I say, please buy. So what the government is doing is right. Borrow some money, even though we are concerned also that the rate of borrowing, given the fact that the government is not having any source of generating strong revenue, given the fact that the economy is undergoing serious recession. Because when you borrow money, you are building roads, you are constructing bridges, you are doing all these things. The people must have the capacity to buy. And so when the economy is going down, you keep doing all those things, there will be a strong gap between them. So we think, let the government start doing it now, instead of saying, well, we've been on this thing for long. We'll borrow sometimes some scenarios from China, sometimes scenario from domestic. Let the government borrow and then keep spending. That will put will reduce the pressure on CBN.
But wouldn't that amount to the issue of liquidity in the economy? That has been the one of the complaints, all the while leading to inflation as well.
Yeah, the present situation with the inflation, as I said, is not because there are too many money, as it were, chasing
too few goods.
The situation is there are few money chasing few goods.
Okay.
So if the government spends the real economy will boost, we come up. The manufacturer, the SMEs, government spending is part of, I'm going to give out loans, I'm going to do this. So when they have the capacity, domestic capacity, so that's why we think it's a good step.
Okay.
Segun Mishakin, economist, thank you so much for enlightening us even further on this.
Thank you very much.